We now live in a world where it is incredibly difficult to know what is the truth, mainly because the media is in bed with the government and they only ever shape the truth in such a way that the government seems to come off looking fine and dandy. In such a world, it is very difficult to know what is actually happening, and that is by design. More specifically, a lot of people might be looking at what the United States is doing to South Africa and thinking to themselves, this is so unfair. Why are the United States, acting upon false information of genocides pushed by AfriForum and Solidarity? Never mind the fact that News 24 and the City Press and Sunday World have all been forced to apologize for making that false claim in the first place. AfriForum and Solidarity has never claimed that there is a white genocide happening in the country, even though they technically should, but that's beyond the pale. The media, their job is to lie. As a result of this, one should be really afraid of what is about to happen in our world. If you are watching this video and you are one of those people that think, you know what, America is just acting on bad information, they're not. Stick around and wait it out, and you'll start to see by the end of this video exactly what the Americans are up to, how the Americans are setting the stage for a new world, one that will be a lot more divided, but can also be a lot more united, dependent on which side you choose. The South African government still believes that China will be the one to save them from the blight of the United States, except it's Europe that is bailing South Africa out. Why? Because the Chinese are now treating South Africa as a universal dumping ground for all goods that they cannot export to the United States of America. Our trade deficit with the Chinese have widened from 140 billion rand to 162 billion rand. Our exports to China is down below 184 billion rand, whereas China has gone from 330 billion rand to now 142 or 146 billion rand. The Chinese are not the kind of friends that you want to be in business with. Moreover, when you actually look at the Chinese official data, their economy is starting to falter. You see, the Chinese economy is built on production. It needs to produce and then export. That is the entire secret behind how they became so rich. It has nothing to do with communism. It has nothing to do with the genius of central planning. It is that in the early 90s, the Chinese were willing to start opening up their markets, and the world took note. The world falsely believed that if it just gave China all of their business and the Chinese people started to get richer and richer and richer, they would eventually rebel against the communist government, and this is how we would defeat communism once and for all. And so the entire world moved all of their production into China. As a result of this, China was able to get very, very rich. The problem, now that America is closed for business, China is finding it harder and harder to sustain this economic growth, and every metric from the official numbers of the CCP show that the Chinese economy is slowing down and may actually be on approach for incredible stagnation. And this brings us then neatly into today's story. The United States is forging a new world order. The United States have had enough of countries around the world consistently taking advantage of the United States and then utilizing that advantage to help others. And this op-ed from the 1st of July 2025 by Secretary of State Marco Rubio proves what America is starting to do. America is now going to prioritize trade, not aid. The claim in this article is that they have heard from several countries throughout the world who have received massive amounts of United States aid that it is not what they need. Because aid is one directional. It doesn't actually lead to the betterment of the people of that country, not in the long run. And so instead, what they will be focusing on is building relationships with these countries. But they highlight another problem. Beyond creating a globe-spanning NGO industrial complex at taxpayers' expense, he's speaking about US aid here. US aid has little to show since the end of the Cold War. Development objectives have rarely been met, instability has often worsened, and anti-American sentiment has only grown. For example, in 2023, sub-Saharan African nations voted with the United States only 29% of the time on essential resolutions at the UN, despite receiving $165 billion in outlays since 1991. So America's done with the aid. They're done with the freebies. Instead, what they're starting to look for are partners, nations that focus and want to focus on free trade, that want to focus on free societies, free speech, the freedom of the individual, nations that are not corrupt, and nations that actually want to get to business. This is going to divide the global order, and we'll get to that at the end of the video. But now, let's focus on the newest op-ed. This is from the 3rd of December, also from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And there's a couple of really interesting things in this article that I wanted to highlight because your blood is going to run cold as you hear this when you realize that South Africa is now truly viewed by the United States as its adversary. So the first thing I want to focus on is why did the Americans decide not to come to the G20 of this year? You've heard a lot of fake news and a lot of fake stories throughout this time, but there's actually a lot more to it. The politics of grievance carried over to South Africa's presidency of the G20 this month, which was an exercise in spite, division, and radical agendas that have nothing to do with economic growth. South Africa focused on climate change, diversity and inclusion, and aid dependency as central tenets of its working groups. Basically, what he's saying here is South Africa was a little beggar standing with its hands in this. You guys all know what these hands mean. If you live in South Africa, you know exactly because you see it all the time. But standing with its hands like this is one of those kids at the robots here in South Africa begging and going. That's literally what he's accusing the South African government of doing with their G20. Basically convening the nations of the world and saying, hey, give us free because we love it. Thank you. It routinely ignored U.S. objections to consensus communiques and statements. It blocked the U.S. and other countries' inputs into negotiations. It actively ignored our reasonable faith efforts to negotiate. It doxed U.S. officials working on these negotiations. It fundamentally tarnished the G20's reputation. For these reasons, President Trump and the United States will not be extending an invitation to the South African government to participate in the G20 during our presidency. There is a place for good faith disagreement, but not dishonesty or sabotage. Now, for those of you who say the Americans can't uninvite the South Africans from the G20, we are a founding member. Yeah, but they give the visas. And they can just say no visas for you. I mean, South Africa cannot go because no matter who it is, the president or literally anyone else will be arrested on sight the second they set foot on American soil. So, no, you are not invited, then you are truly not invited. But okay, so here we get to the South African portion. What is America's actual problems with South Africa? South Africa entered the post-Cold War era with strong institutions, excellent infrastructure, and global goodwill. It possessed many of the world's most valuable resources, some of the best agricultural land on the planet, and was located around one of the world's key trading routes. In Nelson Mandela, South Africa had a leader who understood that reconciliation and private sector-driven economic growth were the only path to a nation where every citizen could prosper. This isn't exactly true. Nelson Mandela was a full-blown socialist. He just knew that there was no way that socialism would work at that time in South Africa. Sadly, Mandela's successors have replaced reconciliation with redistributionist policies that discouraged investment and drove South Africa's most talented citizens abroad. Racial quotas have crippled the private sector, while corruption bankrupts the state. The numbers speak for themselves, as South Africa's economy has stagnated under its burdensome regulatory regime driven by racial grievance, and it falls firmly outside the group of the 20 largest industrialized economies. Rather than take responsibility for its failings, the radical ANC-led South African government has sought to scapegoat its own citizens and the United States. Increasingly, what have I said to you guys? Instead of taking responsibility, the victims of Africa can only ever blame everyone but themselves. The South African government is the one that caused this. They are the ones that implemented BEE. They are the ones that implemented affirmative action. They are the ones that implemented employment equity. They are the ones that have made every single element of doing business in this country more cumbersome, more expensive, and more difficult. They are the ones who oversee the destruction and the fall of the South African economy, and yet time and time again, whenever they can, they will blame AfriForum Solidarity, every white person they can find, even babies are not excused from this. Because they were born, they put unnecessary strain on the economy of South Africa, and that is just how it is. And of course, the uneducated ANC voter has no ability to discern whether or not this is true because, well, they don't understand anything. But that's just how it is, and that is by design. As President Trump has rightly highlighted, the South African government's appetite for racism and tolerance for violence against its Afrikaner citizens have become embedded as core domestic policies. And again, he is not wrong. They call it redress laws. It's not racial laws, it's redress laws. Well, that's core domestic policies, and America is not falling for it because they're not stupid. It seems intent on enriching itself while the country's economy limps along, all while South Africans are subject to violence, discrimination, and land confiscation without compensation. For anyone that says this isn't happening, it literally is happening. Its former ambassador to the United States was openly hostile to America. Its relationships with Iran, its entertainment of Hamas sympathizers, and cozying to America's greatest adversaries move it from the family of nations we once called close. And it ends with this. The United States supports the people of South Africa, but not its radical ANC-led government, and will not tolerate its continued behavior. When South Africa decides it has made the tough decisions needed to fix its broken system and is ready to rejoin the family of prosperous and free nations, the United States will have a seat for it at our table. Until then, America will be forging ahead with a new G20. So what exactly is America doing here? Well, America is forging a new world order, one with a table of nations, nations who are allies to one another, but most importantly, nations who are not dependent on the United States for its survival. In order to understand this, you have to understand how the world became what it is today. After the end of the Second World War, the world was in tatters. The only country unaffected mostly by the Second World War was the United States. As a result of this, the United States made concessions to the rest of the world. But at the same time, they had a couple of stipulations. For one, you will all use the US dollar to trade, and you will all allow our military bases around the world to extend our influence. As a result of this, and if you choose to do so, we will police the world's oceans, we will police the world in general, and we will make sure that business is booming, provided that all of you do business with us. The result? A world completely addicted to the American dollar, a world completely addicted to American freebies and American goodwill. Trump understands that this is no longer something that can continue. No one nation can carry the rest of the world, and the problem with all of these countries being addicted to American aid and American goodwill is that a lot of these countries have started to take advantage of that in order to push incredibly harmful socialist policies in their own nations, knowing that the Americans, through the US aid system, will just pay the bill for these problems. Take, for example, all of the stories we found out about how many billions of dollars were funneled from US aid into countries in Europe, where that money physically funded the free healthcare that those European nations would give to their own people. This all the while, the American public did not get any free healthcare from its government. They were merely paying for everyone else's healthcare. So Trump is done with that. What Trump wants now, and if you go through everything that they're saying, he wants equal nations that can stand on their own 2 feet and that can actually contribute to this process, this plan of a new world. That will not include nations like China, nations like Russia. It will not include nations like Iran, nations that do not value freedom, that do not value the individual, but instead want the government to be at the center of every single problem that is solved. That is the reason why South Africa has become a target for the United States. That is the reason why South Africa or the United States are increasingly dealing with South Africa as a hostile nation. And we may actually start to see sanctions very soon against South Africa should the ANC continue to play this boisterous game of believing that we can go equals with the United States. We cannot. And the allies that we think will be able to back us up, they will not. China is busy slowing down. They may actually start reversing course. Russia is on the brink of economic collapse. Iran is about one decision away from starting nuclear war in the Middle East because that's literally all they care about. They're a death cult that literally just wants to kill all Jews, and all Christians throughout the world. So yeah, there's literally no real hope in the allies that you have. India is on the verge of a war between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So again, the list of nations that South Africa calls home is starting to run very thin. And if you think Europe is going to choose South Africa over America, you're out of your mind. South Africa doesn't have the purchasing power or the economic power to really make that a reality. And I do think that at some point in time, the Americans are going to say, if you want to do business with China or with South Africa or with any of these other nations, you do not get to do business with us. As always, ladies and gentlemen, that is my opinion. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of it. If you like what I do and you think more people should have access to the content that I make, please consider hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and sharing this video around with as many people as possible. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members for continuing to support this channel and making content like this possible. If you like what I do and you want to see this channel grow even more and do even more, you can become a patron by hitting the link in the description down below or the join button right below this video for YouTube membership. As always, I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.